Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. My name's Josh. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with a super famous podcast host. So excited, been following his work. Mr. Kison, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Kison Patel, CEO and founder of a company called M&A Science, came from a background doing M&A advisory with a boutique practice based out of Chicago. A lot of hospitality, small financial institutions, and in that experience, identified with a lot of the pain points and challenges of managing M&A. I took inspiration from the software industry and particularly the way software engineers would utilize project management tools to manage developing software and thought, why not for M&A? Started the company DealRoom in 2012 with the mission to bring project management technology to M&A. And that evolved. It evolved from a product that we focused in solving for diligence management to then integration management, then pipeline management as a full lifecycle management solution. And when working with larger corporations, we quickly learned that there was a bigger underpinning problem in the industry, in that the industry was very siloed off and lacked standardization, best practices, real evidence in the approaches we're taking to do M&A, which with that, I'd say, a friend of mine in marketing that was introducing the idea of doing a podcast and sort of married this together, leveraging a podcast as a platform to enable M&A practitioners to share lessons learned so we can then in turn identify what are the patterns, what are the actual proven techniques in the industry, and we document them into various frameworks, of which we published a book called Agile M&A a few years ago that based on case studies with Google and Atlassian and how they utilize agile techniques in their M&A approach with great success, we've developed into a framework to help other organizations adopt those same techniques. But all things M&A.
Yeah, all things M&A. Now, when you created M&A Science, why didn't you go M&A Arts, right? Is M&A just a science-based thing? Is there an art form to it? Is there a marrying of the two? What are your thoughts there?
It's both. We used to run a newsletter when we first started the company back in 12, 13 called the Art, I think it was called the Art of Deal Making. And then that's the art is there. And I think in our industry we pride ourselves on the art, the deal making, but the science is what's actually lacking. That what is the actual things based on evidence that really make a difference, that drive the results, that drive the efficiency that's much needed in M&A. Because today we still operate in a highly inefficient environment with unpredictable results.
So even with CFOs, right? There was the art of the deal, and you've had these books written about the art of these transactions, right? But you're saying there's actually patterns that we've found and things that we saw that we can replicate, duplicate, put frameworks in. And you said there's actually the science behind this. What patterns did you see in this siloed industry as you were building out M&A Science?
The first was with the tech companies. We saw large serial acquirers, tech companies that ran these agile based approach to M&A. It was less about creating a highly detailed plan and going about executing it at close. It was more about having a high level of transparency, having a team that was able to act quickly on new information that they received. It was more about responding to changes as they were happening as opposed to following a plan. And that's
Yeah.
the very nature of agile. And when we see companies perform much better with that fundamentally different approach, that was when we knew that, hey, there's going to be a big change in this industry that's going to happen soon. We can tell right away that there's case proof point here that the companies that follow this sort of modern approach have dramatically better outcomes than the old school traditional, I'm going to financially model the crap out of this, predict a bunch of synergies, and have this top down plan driven management approach.
Got it. All right. So you and I are having coffee. You're in Chicago, right?
Correct.
All right, so we're having coffee in the morning, and the perfect deal comes and sits at the table with us, and they start going through and you're like, this is my favorite type of project to work on. What's that look like for you?
It's identifying with the early, understanding where are we going with this deal? Like where is the real opportunity? Because it's beyond just making financial sense. We got to have this end state in mind that's going to create significant value for our customers. At the end of the day, my organization's there to serve its customers and create value for them, as I assume your organization's in place to create value for your customers. Us coming together, how is that going to create a better customer experience? What is that going to look like? Like, what is that real end state? Can we crystallize it and then start outlining that go to market? What are the things that we need to do to make it happen? I think that fundamentally needs to be there in place, coupled with an understanding of our organization's values. That if I can understand what's key in our company's values as well as yours, that lends into understanding culture, the leadership approach, because that's where a lot of times these deals go awry is during the integration. When you find out we have two stark different cultures and there's components that are complementary and there's components that are not, and create this friction that becomes very difficult to overcome. Can we identify where we have commonalities and these differences and be able to incorporate that as our approach when we pursue the deal?
Yeah. Now, in M&A, right? You say one of the major problems that occur is in integration, right? The deal's done, and now we're integrating teams and we're putting all the pieces together. Um, how does choosing an appropriate broker or the proper due diligence on the front end ensure that the integration will go a little bit smoother once we get pieces together?
It's a tough one. This is there's a nature of the transaction itself. If you're doing a transaction and it is an auction based process that's designed to be highly competitive, a lot of those things go out the window. You are running on very tight time constraints
Mhm.
and you don't get the time to do the in-depth integration planning. Everything's very compressed. You minimize it and you're taking much bigger chance on the deal. On the other hand, if you're working on a transaction with a single buyer, single seller, you get a time frame that's manageable, where we can look at what we're trying to achieve, put a lot more consideration and build timelines around what we're trying to achieve. And that creates the ability to have the time to do the proper planning for integration. And the earlier that integration planning starts, the better it is for both organizations. If there can be considerations for the company that's getting acquired to have an understanding of the company that they're going to get integrated into so they know what that is going to entail and be part of that journey. I think you can also position yourself as a buyer to have better engagement from that company that you're acquiring as well.
Very cool. So this is kind of there's the transactional side, right? Here's the auction, it's like eBay, and here's the time clock, and things are clicking down. We're going out to the market, highest bidder wins, right? And you see some challenges there. And then you say, but there's this other piece where it could be strategic buyers, and you could work on with both the buying team and the selling team to make sure that there's proper alignment in leadership, culture. What other things do you see that should be aligned in this buying and selling process?
There's a lot of things that happen when you get into the little details because you're looking at the largest magnitude of change management this organization is possibly going to go through, where you're essentially peeling back all these businesses, processes, layer by layer, and reattaching them to the parent organization, the acquirer, and that disrupts everything. So if you can put more time and consideration into what's potentially going to break as we go through this integration process and be able to manage those risks, that's what ultimately you're trying to do by spending that time to have that planning in place so that everyone's prepared for all this change that's going to happen. So it impacts it, but can you manage the change, but can you still keep alignment around keeping the customer experience, there, and really focusing on not disrupting that.
Yeah. Where do you think corporations go wrong with maybe having an internal team to do acquisitions and integrations versus working with an outside partner? Where do you think that they could go wrong with that?
The internal is good.
Yeah.
The key competency you want is knowing the business, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows your business better than the people in your company.
Yeah.
But there potentially could be knowledge gaps if it's a company that's never done M&A before. And that's where it helps to have that executive experience that's done M&A and be able to help this organization go through that journey and shorten the learning curve. That they're expensive learning curves. When you screw up an M&A deal, I don't know what costly or mistake you can make, and you inevitably make a series of mistakes as you mature your capabilities of doing M&A.
Got it.
So that's where it helps, and I think there's a variety of different advisors out there. So understanding where you could use the help. If it's integrating it, is it specifically the project management component? There's a lot of consulting services that offer integration and project management. Do you want to work with some of them? Is it more of a certain function that whether the accounting, whether it's more the HR side, and then you can find somebody that really specializes in that functional area. So the advisors are good. I think it's just making sure you're filling in the right gaps. You're getting the right competency for the areas that you need.
When should a so we're at coffee. When should a company come to our table and say, "Hey, Kison, we need your help to fill this gap"? Like when does a company reach out to you and go, "We need help in this
Earlier the
process"?
better. I feel like for us, like our business, we build out a lot of our core work is building out the technology, right? We're building out the end-to-end technology and the information management piece. So a lot of the providers touch it, but when you go through and you do deal after deal after deal, you have your network of go-to folks, right? And you sort of queue them up at the right time and usually do it ahead of time. Hey, we got something we're working on. Want to give you the heads up so that you don't want to reach out to somebody last minute and they're like, hey, my plate's full. Unfortunately, I can't help you right now. So you tend to queue people up pretty early. And then as the deal progresses, that's when you bring them in.
Yeah. So you grew up in the Midwest, right? If we went back in time and had a conversation with you and we're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? If we asked your 18-year-old self, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
Probably a Porsche engineer.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, I wanted to be a car engineer. I loved cars. I loved the design pieces of it. I was obsessed with Porsche. I think I was taking German in high school, trying to, uh, prepare to go down the engineering path.
Yeah. So so let's ask this question: like, how did the change happen? How did you get from wanting to be a car engineer for Porsche to M&A work?
I think I shifted over in undergrad to IT, and then I ended up failing out of undergrad, and then ended up taking a whole different direction. Ended up in real estate, worked in residential real estate, wasn't good at it, hated it. Ended up with a small M&A little boutique advisory shop that got my feet in the ground, looking at working with clients, doing all the grunt work, cold calling,
Mm.
reviewing P&Ls with clients was one of the things I enjoyed doing, building the story of here's an opportunity for the business, how you can create value. And yeah, I didn't agree with the firm's overall strategy. A year later, I left and at an early age started my own consulting practice that I built up over a decade.
Yeah. All right. So this is interesting, right? If we looked at if we're mentoring someone together and you're like, okay, started it, wanted to be a car engineer, switch over to IT, failed out of that, got into residential real estate, not too good at that, moved over to starting to broker deals in businesses, and then got your feet wet, created a boutique. But then here we go, opportunity number 7 or 8 that really started to click for you. Like, if you could look back and change a piece of that, what would you have done differently, or do you think that the whole journey was necessary?
It it does. You sort of learn things the hard way, and those are the lessons that stick with you. If I were to go back and change something, I think identifying with the learning pattern earlier. I failed out of school. I had a really short attention span as the reason I ultimately struggled. I get lecture-based classes, and I didn't have the bandwidth to really pay attention and take the proper notes. Uh, if I could go back and really understand the value of reading, that this is a tool, and understand the rules, that I can pick and choose and learn about the things that I want to learn about. If I'm reading a book and I don't like the book, I can stop reading it and pick it up a different book, and so forth, and really build that out. There's things I can Google search. There's things I'm going to learn from other subject matter experts,
Yeah.
and understand that there's a pattern I create when I'm going in an area and I want to learn about it, that I use a combination of these resources to build that understanding that allows me to make better decisions and problem solve better. That ability, if I were to focus on it consciously earlier, I think would have helped accelerated things, because some of those things took a while. I didn't understand the value of having that network with other subject matter experts, and being able to leverage that till later on, like year into my 30s.
Yeah.
But now it's like I go back anytime I find a new business line we're exploring right now, in the search industry. I'm talking to everybody I know in the search industry. I'm knocking on doors and saying, hey, I got this idea, but I want to run it by you because you're the veteran expert in this field. Let me learn from you. And
Yeah.
people are more than welcome. Usually people hit this level of success and they get to the point where they can keep driving at what they're doing, but they find greater satisfaction in helping others achieve their level of success.
Hmm.
So inherently now I'm doing the same thing. Co-podcast, can we share some lessons learned? So I think that all ties together, whether learning from the subject matter experts, having the exercise, just like physically, to read a book, build that as part of your regimen. It's healthy for you. It's good for your brain. But put it all together as your learning pattern. If I were to consciously thought about that's one of the important skills to develop,
Mm.
that would have probably accelerated that journey.
Learning from others is a lot cheaper and a lot less painful, isn't it? Holy moly.
It is. You just got to be proactive at it.
Yeah,
You can stumble and fall along the way, and it does cost you more.
it does. What was your most expensive lesson that you have ever learned?
There's a lot of them. The most expensive lesson was the startup fever that you get, where you have an idea, you start socializing it with your peer friends and family, and convince them that it's a great idea. They're advocating for you, and you want to rush to build it. You want to raise money. You want to use your savings and go out and build a product. And those, time after time, were the most expensive mistakes I've made.
Mm.
I had one was really, really early. Spent, I remember, $70,000 and didn't have anything to show for it. And then I even this deal room, you got this like feature creep. You build an outline. You have every possible feature functionality that anybody in the world could want. Then you start building it, and again, you didn't start at the right place. You didn't deliver the value early, and then you had to rebuild everything. If looking back at what I could have changed to prevent that, or to minimize it, would have been to validate those ideas,
Hmm.
to really create a feedback loop with your cohort of potential customers, and validate from the beginning, not the solution, the problem. What is the biggest problem Josh is facing today? Can I validate that? Is that, I might do a series of these interviews, and again, we're identifying patterns and find out there's actually a bigger, more interesting problem that, the various folks and Josh and his cohort have, that I should actually shift focus. So that's the interesting thing when you actually build a regimen properly, as unbiased as possible, go and validate the problem you're solving, you may stumble across a bigger, more interesting problem to solve. I think that when you create that feedback loop, you continue it with the solution you develop. Today, we keep the whole thing. I look at our product we developed. I don't think even 3% of it's ideas for myself. I don't think it's even that, maybe 1%. It's all generated from feedback, that we constantly collect feedback. We go to market, we learn what's working, what's not, and we build around it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now you talk about learning lessons from other people. Like you're now applying this with kids, right? You're talk to us about your project of teaching principles and lessons to kids.
That's my passion project. I have a personal podcast I started with inspiration from my daughter, who at the time this started was around 7 years old. I read the book Ray Dalio's Principles to her as like bedtime reading, which was obviously well above her reading level, but it opened up some really interesting conversations. What's the difference between open-minded versus closed-minded? The way the brain works. How do you establish goals and pursue those goals? And that led to thinking of my own personal principles, which I shared with my kids. And it had a lot of fun, interesting conversations. I wanted to get. It led me to thinking I didn't learn a lot of this stuff till I was in my 30s. When's the right age to learn this stuff? And I don't think there is an age that's like this is stuff you should try to teach as early as possible. It's stuff that school doesn't teach. Um, and so I made a point with my daughter. I said, Dad doesn't know all this stuff. I have my view on what principles drive success, but why don't we make a point to go interview other successful people and learn from them? So we did a few pilot interviews, or I actually let her lead the interview. The fun one was the first one we did with the CEO of Morningstar, Kunal Kapoor, who was nice enough to take the time and do this lesson. It was funny because he had no idea at the time she's only 9 years old, and we live streamed this whole interview. But it's just a fun, interesting thing that I'm really passionate about in terms of teaching some of these fundamental leadership lessons to kids at an early age, so they can build on them as they tend to be lifelong lessons that we continue to evolve and shape as we progress through our life journey.
That's so cool. Now, I've got three kids, 8, 4, and 1 at the time of this recording. And I think you have three kids as well, right?
Yep.
If there's one principle that you could instill in them, like the most important principle to you, what's the most important principle?
There's two that come to mind.
Okay,
One,
make your
one,
own rules. Go
one,
for it.
well, one makes me think of your situation, and I remember with my daughter, the first thing was kids learn how to say thank you and sorry. And I told my daughter, I said, I don't want you saying those words alone. Those words really don't have any meaning. They're essentially transactional words that we use. They don't have any meaning to them. I want you, if you are going to use thank you or sorry, create the meaning with it. Thank you and sorry, why? For what? And even the small things, right? We go to the grocery store. That was the thing I always do with the kids. We go to the grocery store and we check out. Thank you for bagging the groceries. Thank you for the small talk. Thank you for the smile. Thank you for being so fast. Thank you for the friendly conversation. Thank you for putting up with my dad. Whatever it is, just create the meaning. Sorry I bumped into you. Sorry I lost your umbrella. And it teaches them to add that little extra, that real definition that I think as adults we tend to forget. Where we start, everything becomes short form. We rush into things. I need help with something. Hey, can you help me do this? But we didn't really elaborate the why. So I really believe if you can introduce that early to kids, it'll stick with them. It'll help them create much more greater impact in their communication and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, the way they connect with others. I think the other one is around empathy. I remember my daughter came home and I could tell something was wrong, and you talked to her about it. And she's like, Dad, this girl is bullying me at school. And I was thinking to myself, this is early. I'm like, I thought this comes in high school. I think she was about that 6 or 7 years old. And I'm like, well, why is she bullying you? She said my hair is ugly and pushed me. I said, okay. Uh, why does she think your hair is ugly? She's like, I don't know. I'll tell you what, I don't think it's your hair. I I have a feeling it could be something totally unrelated. She might be having problems at home. It could be something. There's that little inner self you're fighting with that wants to teach her how to knuckle up and throw some bouts. But I'm like, no, let's really take this to the right level. I want you to just talk to her. I want you to talk to her and find out why she thinks your hair is ugly. I don't know. Maybe you might find something to learn out of it or whatnot. Just try that. Try that and see what happens. And I remember I come home the next day. She comes running, Daddy, guess what? And I'm like, what's up? And she's like, we're best friends now. It's like,
That's awesome.
but so today it still continues. That's again a lifelong thing to learn. I'm still learning it. even today with the siblings, there's little battles, and it's like, okay, always revert to the same thing. How does that person feel, and why do they feel that way? Like until you can connect and understand that, I don't. The details don't matter. I don't want to hear the little this and that or the arguments or anything. I need you to really start with that. Why do they? How do they feel, and why do they feel that way? If you can at least elaborate that and show me that you put in the effort to understand the person, what they're thinking, how they feel, until you've done that, you don't have an argument for me. You don't have any position, because that's the fundamental thing. Whether I'm trying to influence you to do something, or we have a disagreement and we're trying to come to a resolution, unless I'm willing to put in the effort to understand where you're coming from, we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So kind of teaching them that early, the better. But then they'll turn around and use it to manipulate you rather quickly. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, they're smarter than we give them credit for. Those little things are super smart. If I asked your kids what you do for a living, what would they say?
They don't have any science.
Yeah.
They'll probably, yeah. I don't know if they know the business is more than a podcast, because occasionally, maybe once a month, I'll have them listen to it, because I want a QA check, and that's how you improve is get the feedback. You listen to yourself. So when I take them to see grandpa and grandma, I'll play back one of the podcasts, and they'll hear me. But I think that's what they think the extent of my career is.
Yeah, yeah. My kids have no clue. They get to every once in a while come and chew on the microphones or break something in my office, but other than that, they have no clue what syndication is. I mean, they're eight, right? 841. I taught. We had a garage sale at grandma's a couple weeks ago, and my daughter's like, I want to make money. I want to buy stuff. I was like, great. So we had a lemonade stand and a brownie stand. So we're teaching them business principles, right? How to talk to people, because I think kids are on their phones all day, right? And I think if kids could talk to each other or to people, then they're going to be ahead of the game. What business things, right? You got three kids. What business attributes do you see in your kids that you're like, oh man, they're going to nail it. They're going to be ahead of the curve, or you're like, this is their skill set.
They're also different.
Yeah.
I think my daughter's relentless. She did the same thing. I think she was 6 and said, "Dad, I want to do a lemonade stand." And I'm just, but after a while, I said, "Wait a minute. This actually could be a good thing."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, honey. I don't know if you picked the best or worst dad to do this, but we're gonna do this. We're not taking any shortcuts. I mean, we're hand squeezed. Buy them in bulk from Costco. Let's think about branding. Let's think about where do you want to position your location, and so forth." And it was a lot of fun. We were fortunate. We lived near Wrigley Field, so she had a great market to serve with all these patrons of the Chicago Cubs that would attend every home game in the herds, and the employees that would come leaving the stadium afterwards. So that was a fun little thing, and she's just that commitment, seeing things through. I definitely see that with her. She'd help me with the podcast. She'd do some commercials, but now she's off doing her own thing. She's got a business making handmade jewelry. I think she made a few hundred selling to her classmates. Now she's working on her digital distribution model. I got another kid that's an engineer. I think he's plugged in on Roblox 8 to plus hours a day, but I'm sure he'll figure out how to build virtual worlds and create some great things. Then I got the youngest is he's the creative. He's the one that's always there to definitely entertain. And we'll see. He's the youngest have their own stereotype, and we always want the best for them.
Yeah. Now, this is your fourth venture, right? Fourth major venture that you guys are building, and you're hitting some incredible milestones. If we went to number two or three, and you maybe had a down hit or something like that, and you're like, "Ah, I don't know, should I really build a fourth one?" Like, what was the thing that made you go, it's time to build the fourth?
Resilience. I knew I wanted to get into tech, and I had a few things I did. I did the consulting practice. I had a retail franchise I ran. I had some pretty rough starts getting into tech, where I built some tools for our consulting practice in house. But building websites, building software, two very different things. And I had these first few projects that failed. I remember the first one, I was doing diligence on a company for a completely unrelated deal, but saw one of their acquisitions was purchasing a portfolio of 100 .coms, and they essentially turned this portfolio into a lead generation network for their business. And I thought this is interesting, and noticed in the finance, the .com, the keywords from Google were exponentially higher than a typical. So instead of 25 cents a click, they were $2, $3 a click. So I started doing the same thing. I built this network of websites that would display blog or content posts based on the keyword of the domain. And I think we've acquired about 500 of them. We're operating about 200, and it was generating revenue. It was doing well. One day, Google changed their algorithm, and just whole
Yeah.
grid shut off. So that was some good early lessons learned, and it was disparaging. It was so much. We had so much custom development. Had a whole team we're building, and it was just a whole big roadmap ahead of us. And all of a sudden, everything, tsunami came and took it all out. Um, I think there was just that. I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go in tech. I saw that checking a lot of the boxes of my personal goals of I didn't want to be restricted. I want to be part of this sort of future tech enabled world where you can essentially work virtually from different locations. You can travel for business and things of that sort. I've always ran these businesses where they're very localized.
Hmm.
That drew me in. I think it was that pursuit, and then going back to what you know. At the end of it, I was trying these different ventures, but weren't built off of what I knew, where my domain expertise was, where they familiar with the fundamentals, the way M&A works, buyers, sellers, going back to that and saying, hey, what can I solve for this industry that I already know? And that's where it came back to some of these ideas, inspirations that led to starting the company DealRoom in 2012 that evolved into the M&A Science we have today.
Very cool. What would if I asked your kids, or maybe some of your leadership, what is your superpower in business? If they could name your top superpower in business, what would that be?
Resilience. I think it's just that. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, Josh, by any means. It's not that. I just work harder. That's it. Like
Yeah.
I'm highly competitive. I was talking to my daughter about this a while back, and I was trying to get a point across about mindset, and I said, hey, because she's really into track, and I said, look, honey, imagine you got to go to this race, and there's like 10 people in a race, and you got one racer that's coming in with this mindset that, hey, these people are pretty good. I'm going to do my best and see what happens. And you got another racer that looks around and said, look, under no circumstance will I let anybody beat me. I'm going to win by all means. I'm going to give it everything and make sure I win. Like, who do you think's more likely to win?
Yeah.
The second racer. Okay, why? And well, the point I was trying to make is you have this desire, and you can control that desire, even if you got to artificially amp it up and get yourself in that mindset to really want this thing more than anything else. It lends to this parallel effort that you tend to put in when you want something more,
Hmm.
which then usually gets you the results. Not always, but usually. So fundamentally, that's where I would say I'd like to focus on is can I put in this effort? Can I have this desire and amplify it that lends to the effort that'll get me the results I want? Um, I'll beat out the smarter Harvard MBA guys with that approach.
Nice. All right. So you and I are about to walk into a big deal, and we got to amp ourselves up. We got to get our mindset right. We got to pump ourselves up. We pick up our phone and we plug and play our favorite song to amp ourselves up to get ready for the big close. What song is yours?
Whew, that's a good one. I still like Eminem, "Lose Yourself." That's
Yeah.
a good. It's got like the rock beat to it. It's got good lyrics. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Eminem, yeah. He's great. I mean, he revolutionized music. He did a really good job. Like him or hate him, he made a dent in the music scene. What about movies? I'm always curious about like in the arts, right? In the arts world, like what kind of movies do you like, or do you not watch movies or
I
TV
don't watch a
shows?
lot. I don't watch a lot. When I do, it's always like Disney animation, with a lot of the kids. I don't watch a lot of movies. I'll try to catch some of whatever's happening on Netflix just so I'm not out of tune. I know with the kids are probably inappropriately watching all the Squid Games, series. But I really don't. I really don't, Josh. I don't. I'll here and there I'll try to take a break, but I still have that little bit since I was a kid where I can't sit down that long and really,
Really zoom in,
sit
right?
things. Yeah, I want to get up. I want to do something. I start thinking about one of the other projects we're working on,
Hmm.
and sort of get distracted over there.
You and I do this huge, massive deal. We close it, big payday for us, like celebrate, and a little extra disposable cash for us to go have some fun. And you get to maybe go for a ride or buy your favorite Porsche. Do you have like this dream Porsche that you're like, oh, that's what I'm going for?
If I were to get a dream Porsche,
Yeah,
their 911 converted their Cabriolet 4S.
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I would get that. I would say I'd definitely like a Porsche from the early inspirations. I would definitely do that. But yeah, otherwise I'd find something fun. There's definitely a lot of ways you can kind of kick up your adrenaline.
Yeah, the
But these
kids,
days the electric cars, man, those things are just as fast as anything else.
they're quick. Yeah, but the kids are not allowed to bring their car seat and juice boxes in the Porsche, right? Like that's a no.
Yeah, no.
All right. So here you're building a business. You got about 30 employees. You guys are growing and expanding. You got your podcast show. You have your passion projects. Like, what's the future look like if you and I, catch up in 5-10 years and we look back and you're like, man, we did it. What does that look like? What does the future look like for you?
We've been doubling revenues the last 4 years consistently. So if we keep doing that, we'll be in a really good spot. I think that's what it is. We built a nice business model. It's shifting gears to scale. And if we can take what we've produced, their capabilities of creating value, and be able to scale it, it's going to be a dramatic change to the industry where a lot of the things we're advocating for will become the standard best practices. I think that's when we know we've really made it, when we've become the practice of majority of the acquirers in the industry.
Yeah. So you have a few podcast shows, right? How many podcast interviews have you done, and what's your favorite question to ask someone?
So I've done maybe 200, something about 200, and the M&A Science, we have a signature question at the end, which is, what's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
What's the
And that
craziest thing you've heard? So you've asked 200 people this question. What's the craziest thing you've heard?
there's a lot. There's always something very unique, very different. There's a lot of these cultural references I thought were interesting of people like getting to go do an M&A deal and they're in Texas and people are like pulling guns out of their holsters and putting them on the table. And, you got some guys from New York that are just taken back by that.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of negotiation are we in? Are they trying to make a point? Or you got the ones that go, some of these other areas, and people are like lighting a joint or something in a meeting.
Colorado versus Texas versus New
Colorado.
York.
Yeah, I feel like those are always fun stories when you hear. And then you got the international deals where they're just different customary traditions and things of that sort that impact the whole deal negotiation. Or trying to do a deal in Japan, and it's like, how many flights does it take to get the deal done?
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of fun stories. When we ask that question.
Is there an interview that you did after 200? Is there an interview that stood out to you that you're like, man, that was a lot of fun?
There's some good ones. We did one this last year uh, with I'm trying to blank on his name, Jim at VMware. Jim Buckley. It was just one of the things where personality to personality just got along with him really good. He's just one of those people you'd meet and hit it off with right off the gate. And I think that was just, it was worked out really well. It became a very comfortable conversation that we got to get into some really fun details, a lot of great stories because he's got such phenomenal experience. But I think that was the key part is that you had such a great like personality, complemented each other so well that it led to a really, really good interview.
Yeah. So you guys, a few years back, you were like, should we build a podcast? Should we not build a podcast? Now you built one that hit top of charts, right? Like you're doing incredible over there. Like if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice, like, hey, you're about to start a podcast. It's going to be crazy. You're going to do 200 interviews. You're going to break all sorts of records. But I need you to pay attention to this. What would you tell yourself before you hit record the first time?
I probably could have committed more in volume earlier. Like with the
Yeah.
first couple of years, I was only doing 10 interviews a year. Like there was, and I think with that, there's a learning curve, period. Everything you do, there's a learning curve. With podcasting, it's like get the first 100 out of the way. I think you know this as well, Josh. Just get that first 100 out of the way. And in fact, if anybody asks me about starting a podcast today, that's the first thing I tell them. I said, look, we're just record the first one and make it as terrible as you can make it terrible. And I get that the laugh or the blank stare, like, what do you mean? Why?
Yeah.
Because that way, when you record the 100th, you can look back and be like, damn, I got good.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't, I was telling this, you don't get good. It took me a lot more, but you don't get good until 100, where you like start getting a little bit more comfortable in your skin, where someone's talking, you could challenge someone, right? You're not just a question and reading off a question list or something like that. So it probably took me 3 or 400 to start getting decent at it. But in doing this, what life lesson do you think that you've pulled from this that you're like, man, I'm so glad I did these interviews?
You learn so much.
You learn so
I think
much.
doing this, you learn a lot because you're taking this time, especially our podcast is an educational podcast. So it's very much focused on I have an hour of your time. Let me learn as much as I can.
Hmm.
It allowed you to access people that you wouldn't normally be able to access. I think
Yeah.
we've already got 4 public company CEOs coming up this next couple months. These are people I would never answer anything I have to send to them, but they're coming on the podcast. So it gives you this accessibility, and then the relationships you build. Everybody I've interviewed, I can always reach back, have a conversation if I'm in town. Can I say hello, make a point? So you end up building really good relationships through this platform as well. Those are all things I didn't anticipate on.
Yeah. Yeah. I originally started it out for like an audience. I wanted to be famous, like get people to be interested in my fitness technology company so I could have all these followers. And, I counted that. And then after doing a few hundred and then going broke in the process of building podcast number 7 or 8, I realized like the people who I interviewed kept on reaching out and going, "Hey, Josh, how's it going?" I'm like, "Hey, stop talking to me. I'm trying to hit an audience." And I was like, "Wow, man, I've been missing it." The relationships that I built, the one-on-one through the podcast, have been invaluable. I've had dinner. I've done business deals. I've created businesses together. We've gone on family trips. And I was like, I missed it the whole time. I was chasing this shiny object audience. And then I realized
Mm-mm.
relationships were the thing that was most valuable for it.
Yeah, they
Um,
come later. You reminded me when I told you I was in Florida before.
yeah.
I went there with my youngest son. He's only 6 years old,
Mm.
and we're off of South Beach, and it's Mamma Mia gelato. Like if you go to South Beach, you got to have Mamma Mia gelato. So I go in there, and a gentleman says, "Hey, don't you have a podcast called M&A Science?"
So
And that
good.
was just like the biggest ego boost. It was just funny after all these years, to actually get recognized for it.
Yeah.
But it led to a fun conversation and a follow up. So you never know. But that was just reminded me of that. You don't really do it for that, but just the relationships you can build from it are incredibly valuable.
So true. Do you ever, well, what flavor did you get?
So I got they had like a Oreo type and pistachio, and
Hmm.
my son
Oreo
actually
and
did a better
pistachio.
combination. He did a mango because he's more of a sorbet, and I think he had was it like a lemon or something.
Mm.
But yeah, incredibly good.
Yeah, it sounds great. Next time I'm in Miami, I'm going to go check it out. Um, do you ever get nervous? Like you've done this a couple hundred times. Do you ever get nervous, like either interviewing someone or being interviewed on someone else's show?
I think those jitters go away after a while, right? They do, but they'll come back. And I actually like when they come back. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, this is actually good. I'm nervous, right? Like this is, so it's funny how you go through that. That I think a lot of people. This is where I challenged my daughter. Like when we had a come flying dinner, I had her lead the toast for it. We just had a Christmas party. I always put her. And she's like, Dad, why do you keep doing this? Because it's something I want you to learn. I was really shy growing up as a kid. I struggled with this for years and years and years until like I hit my early 30s when I really, really pushed myself from being a person with social anxiety, fear of death, and speaking in front of people to like incrementally doing it. My strategy originally was to go to the tech events and go to their social networks and see and figure they're all tech geeks and they're going to be shy and stuff. Not the case at all. So I
Yeah.
show up at these events and I find myself as a wallflower as usual. But then I start muscling up and let me walk up to somebody, put my hand out and say hi. Then realize, whoa, if you can get to that point where you can break the ice, everything else is downhill. So then I kept practicing that, going up, be people, put my hand out, say hi. It got easier and easier. Next, you work in the room, then you start working the presentations. I think you do that, you build that level of confidence so that you take that discipline, your things that you're uncomfortable doing, you become comfortable doing them. But then when it does come back, there's little things. It could be the mood of day or whatnot that you get nervous again. Then it's different. It's like you actually like it. You feel like, oh, I'm actually doing something important enough that I'm getting the jitters again.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it tends to go away. And I think that's with a lot of things. But people need to be conscious about that as part of your discipline to overcome and find your comfort.
Yeah, I think paying attention to the jitters is really valuable for us to know something about ourselves. Like, I could interview people all day long if I'm in charge, right? If I have my microphone and it's my show, and if I can control the recording. But going on other people's shows, and I've done it a few hundred times, but I always get nervous. So I go, okay, within the last year and a half, I say yes. When people ask me, hey, do you want to be on a show? I'm like, man, what if they ask me about the time I went broke or bankruptcy or this or that? And I'm like, I'm nervous, right? And I'm like, there's something there to that nervous little tingle feeling, right? Um, so in this, right, what do you think is a challenge internally that you're overcoming in the next stage of your life? What's something that you're learning and growing in?
It's a lot of things with the business that's new to me. So even leadership, where you have to manage a team, but you no longer have the time to have one-on-ones with everybody, and you really need to delegate more and more. And I think there's those pieces. There's as organizations crossing over 30 headcount, we're standing up functions, really formalizing the company, looking at how you're building for scale. I think it's a different set of skills that you need to learn aggressively or proactively as you go through. It's new challenges. So I think there's a lot of that in terms of developing unique or particular skills for the organization that's at a different size with different challenges and different stage of growth.
Mm, well, that's awesome. What resource are you turning to help you improve in that gap?
The same ones I had talked about earlier that I read about stuff.
Yeah.
If I see anybody mention anything, have you heard of this technique or have you heard of this? I'll read up on it. I like those blog posts. Wikipedia has been phenomenal. I wish Wikipedia issued degrees. If once you do so many thousands of inquiries in there and you learn a lot.
Yeah.
Um, Connecting with others in the industry, it again goes me back to that. I keep a network of other CEOs that have been for further stages than I have, and I'll pick up a meeting with them. Hey, let me take you out for dinner. Let me go grab drinks maybe once a quarter or a couple times a year, and that's been incredibly helpful to have that as a resource. And then the books, I love picking up these books. We they get often overlooked. I mean, I've reading Michael Dell's biography right now, and just to hear his story from his perspective of all these major challenges he went through from both, taking his company at its public company state private back public again to building it up as a startup. Um, they're just fun things that are inspirational, but they have some good fundamental takeaways. But there's a lot of those books that are condensed of a life term of lessons learned that you can pick up and read.
Yeah, that's good, man. I do have a few more questions before we wrap up. One of the things that I like to do is I bought all these cards, right, that have questions on it, and because it could be left field question, and I have no clue what it's going to be. So I have a card list. Tell me when to stop.
Sure, stop.
Oh gosh, this kind of stuff makes me nervous now. All right, you ready? Who and what should never be trapped within? Okay, who and what should you never be trapped with inside an elevator?
Who and what?
Yeah, who and what should you never be trapped inside an elevator? Like, what are the first things that came to mind?
I'm thinking of somebody that doesn't talk, like somebody that's just very silent, like a mute, just uh,
Super awkward moment, like where you're just staring at each other.
because I'll stop and I'm naturally going to start chit chatting. So I feel like you ever do that where you kind of get on, we used to have those shared Uber rides or whatnot. And you could just feel it right away. This
Yeah,
person's not a social, they're not interested in engaging in the conversation. So I think having a highly reserved person is probably not the best for myself, at least. Um, I think the other thing I think of, and it actually reminds me of a time when I was stuck in the elevator, but I went out to go pick up a pizza and to bring it back to the business I was running, and I got stuck in an elevator with a hot pizza.
oh, jeez. Well, you might as well eat it, right?
That's what I ended up doing. After like 20 minutes, I started eating this pizza.
Like, sorry,
Uh,
guys, I got stuck in the elevator. Thank you for the pizza.
but just thinking of hot food, just I
Yeah.
don't know.
Two more questions. Uh, three more. What you mentioned every once in a while you go out to a drink, with someone to learn and to have a conversation with them. What's your drink of choice? Like if I bought you a drink, I'm like, hey, two of, what's your drink?
Boy, this keeps rotating and changes. Especially now, the New Year's comes. I always go on like a whole 30 no drinking kick for a month. I would say right now probably a cognac French 75.
Really?
Yeah, I've
Nice.
just I used to drink scotch, and the scotch got prohibitively expensive, and realized like there's this whole ecosystem of French cognacs that, based on quality, is a much better ROI. And it's kind of nice. They're distilled from champagne grapes. It gives you a bit of the champagne buzz, and it's
Yeah.
quality.
When you're talking about ROI of an alcohol, is that return on intoxication or what?
Yeah, yeah,
You're just talking taste flavors versus the cost, right?
yeah. You got cheap alcohol, you get a bad headache later. Versus you
Yeah.
get quality alcohol, you still feel fine later.
Exactly, exactly. All right, two more questions. If someone wanted to do a deal with you and connect with you, what's a good way to to reach out to you?
I'd say first, like, learn about what we do. I get a lot of people that reach out, and so mascience.com is our different product lines and so forth. If anybody's just generally interested in learning about M&A, I think we have 350 published blogs and ebooks and stuff. Otherwise, I am reachable on LinkedIn. It's just Kison, Kison Patel, and I'm pretty active there. I think it's a great ecosystem to connect with other professionals, hire, find clients.
Yeah. What questions should I have asked you that I completely screwed up and didn't ask you during this interview?
Yes, a lot. We covered a lot of stuff that I don't normally get into on these interviews.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think of anything that we really, really didn't cover. People always ask like how M&A is changing, but it's like the same question.
Yeah. Well, what question do you want to answer? Like, what question do you wish that someone, like, please, someone out there ask me this question? It could be business or personal. The goal of this show is to get people to know, like, and trust people, like to expose the world to fellow deal makers because we do deals with people we know, like, and trust. So, what question do you wish someone would ask you?
I, I think it's this whole crux of M&A. Like what really does it boil down to? Because we tout this fabled 70 to 80% failure rate. Like, what does that actually mean? Because the context of success and failure is varied per person, per company. And I think the response I'd have on that, it boils down to your ability to drive change in organizations. That ultimately, in today's market, you can't just go buy a business and it's going to print money for you. Those times are over with. It's highly competitive. You need to have a compelling investment rationale that builds in factors on how you're going to generate value. And that essentially is what it comes down to, is your capability of creating value, where you see or have a goal in mind that's going to create value for your customers. How do you go about pursuing the changes to be able to accomplish that? And that's where companies, that's the fail point for companies. When they don't have people aligned on those goals and the right people, the right leadership, things go awry just like any other project. I think with M&A, it's unique because it's not something you're starting from scratch. You're taking this organization that's got their daily way of doing things and really trying to change them. And I think there's more that we could do to understand that, to understand what's our likeliness of having that result and change to produce the outcomes that we're desiring. And that's what's really missing in the industry. Like M&A, it's not financial. It's not about the numbers were wrong. Somebody put the wrong formula in the model, and that's why this deal failed. It's all people to people issues. And the more we can build a science that's really geared around the psychology to understand how people, what drives them, how they're going to get aligned, how you can predict that there's compatibility between these organizations that's going to give a likeliness for the results, and just drive what we need to do to align these people and have them in a spot they're actually motivated, versus just fearful if they've got a job or not, deals announced, they don't know what's going to happen. I think there's a lot to change with the way we do M&A, and there's not a lot of people doing it. We're obsessed with our peer-to-peer exchange of funds through a decentralization, Web3, but the largest transactions in the world aren't driven through digital mechanics. They're driven through people working together. And the more we have this qualitative understanding of what drives each other, I don't know, it's like the leadership, project management pieces that need to really evolve. I think that's the thing, that's just this little gap that we're surfacing that really drives the success and failure of M&A that people don't talk about.
Hmm. Well, that's awesome, man. It's the relationships between people. It all even with all this digital crap that's going on and crypto and blockchain and all this stuff, it still comes down to people building and running those businesses. Man, I promised three more questions. I do have another question.
Sure.
Sometimes I just miss that.
I still got coffee here. We're good.
What is that? So that doesn't count as my other question. I'm looking at your like orange looking coffee.
Oh, this is cold brew. I always take a little cold brew, throw some almond milk in there, call it whatever. It's not a latte, but whatever it is.
Okay, it looks delicious. All right, so the last question, and then we'll conclude, is as you're doing this, I'm sure you've seen some deals gone wild, right? Oil and vinegar, gas and fire, kind of integrative pieces. What is a warning sign that you see, a red flag early on that you see in the people side of the business between leadership that you're like, there's no way this is going to work?
Management styles. You got some old school top down management versus, hey, we know times are changing. And for these large corporations, for them to stay relevant and keep from being the next blockbuster, they need to disrupt themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They need to find these new technologies and disrupt their traditional businesses for them to stay relevant. If they don't, somebody else will disrupt them. Somebody else will come. They'll be the ones getting acquired. And when they do that, they don't look at their way of doing things, their way of leadership, problem solving, decision making, and this startup and the way that they do things. They go through this process of integrating them in a very tactical way, and they destroy the very thing that they went to purchase. The way that this startup does things, their flat organization, the transparency, the collaboration, the agility, the adaptiveness. That's the one thing that if you are a traditional company and you don't spend the time to assess yourself, acknowledge that, and match it with the company you're acquiring, I think that's the early sign that things are going to go awry.
Awesome. Kison, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. This has been I loved getting to know you, hearing your story, and hearing all the nuances behind M&A and integration and the stuff that you're building, your tech company. So I appreciate you letting us behind the scenes into the deal maker and sharing your story. I appreciate you, man. Fellow deal makers out there in the audience, if you're looking for a deal or working on a deal, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. As always, reach out to our guests, say, Kison, thanks for being on the show, sharing your journey. We want to find a way to do a deal together. That's the mission and purpose of the show, is to put deals and deal makers together. So head over, reach out to our guests and say thank you, and then find a way to do a deal with them. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you, everybody.